Okay, we'll begin our broadcast. Well, welcome to the CIECAcast. This is Fred Iantorno, Executive Director of CIECA. Today is the first CIECAcast for 2014. Our presenter, Ken Wilber, will discuss subrogation with us. The presentation will cover the process of subrogation and the key entry points where CIECA brings value to the business. This is accomplished by eliminating claim handling and reporting efforts from the viewpoint of the subrogation vendor and the demanding party, which is normally the insurance company. In the early 90s, Ken first began to handle small subrogation files. Insurance, public entity, and transportation collections quickly became the firm's focus and today account for 100% of all cases handled. Ken is a member of the National Association of Subrogation Professionals, NASP, and is strongly devoted to the subrogation and collection industries. I want to thank all of you for spending your time with us and to Ken for sharing his insight and expertise with us. I will now turn this over to our presenter, Ken Wilber of the Wilbur Group. Ken?
Well, good day, everybody. I appreciate the time each of you have devoted to this. Subrogation is very important to me personally, and I see it becoming increasingly important to the collision industry. And I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to share what CIECA is developing in the subrogation industry. For anybody real unfamiliar with the process, subrogation itself is the act of recovering money paid to policyholders when the claim should have been paid by another carrier or possibly by an uninsured person or self-insured entity. Charlie, let's flip over to what Wilbur Group is. All right. This is what Wilbur Group is. We do subro and nothing else. We process high volumes of carrier-to-carrier, arbitration, and uninsured motorist files to conclusion through payment or litigation, oftentimes. I personally handled my first subro claim in the early 90s for a little carrier located here in Bloomington that you may have heard of. That claim was a simple water damage claim to a downstairs condo unit. It was for around $3,500, and none of the normal defense attorneys would touch it. In the old days, defense attorneys also handled subro files, and they prefer to work on an hourly basis for the most part, where most subro is done on contingency. That complete file was hand-delivered to me in its paper jacket. All my subsequent notes and trial prep were handwritten, and honestly the claim processing time took way longer than the actual work that was required on it. But really, CIECA has brought us to 180 degrees opposite of that, to where almost all that can be done automatically. Next file, Charlie, or Fred. Okay, subrogation is important, and more so every day. It's the last touch with an insured who's been in an accident, possibly been hurt, and it's a great opportunity to show them that you really care about them. Most normally, an insured's deductible is included in the subrogation claim assigned to a vendor, and it's returned to the insured when it's collected. Proper underwriting, servicing, claim handling, that's always been the primary focus of carriers and still should be. But subrogation recovery itself has become especially important because of overall increase in deductible size, the increased importance of customer satisfaction, and the narrower profits, honestly, of carriers. The margins are getting tight. So subrogation recovery is straight to the bottom line and reflects oftentimes a great deal of the profit at the end of the year to a carrier. Technology has opened avenues to utilize outside vendors for this work. The increased internal labor costs, difficulty finding trained, competent folks in your home office is becoming a problem for carriers. And so that has also pushed the work out to outside vendors. So Fred, let's go to what's at stake. Lots and lots at stake. Estimates are almost impossible to pin down as far as number of accidents per year. I mean, between 6 and 10 million auto accidents is a spread wide enough to drive a herd of elephants through. But what it shows is there's a tremendous number of claims out there, and they need to be handled as automated as possible. So estimates are hard to pin down, and those don't even mention the workers' comp, property, and lien claims. We're going to focus on auto today, and we're going to focus on one portion of auto especially, and that's the uninsured motorist claims. They're rapidly increasing because of the recession. They are not the type of claim that's well handled internally because carriers, for the most part, don't have collections mindsets. And to make it worse, they're very tedious and time-consuming to outsource. So this type of claim has been avoided or handled poorly in the past history. Modern technology is starting to be applied in this area, both with the carriers and with the vendors. But that's caused a whole new set of headaches because of the many different languages and claim systems that now have to talk to each other. So vendors on our end, we have to train our employees to read each different carrier note file. Carriers have to learn how to use each vendor's online accesses and read those notes. One of the problems is that we all use the same words or phrases, but they mean different things, and especially cross-industry. Recently, we realized one of our clients considered the status code of PIF to mean payment is final, whereas Wilbur uses it meaning payment in full. And the difference was causing quite a bit of confusion towards the end of the claim files and trying to figure out whether claims were resolved or not. CIECA's aim is to pretty much end that confusion. We will each be using common language, common codes, and there'd never be a difficulty. So let's look at claims, claims just a bit more. Fred, let's go to the next slide, uninsured motorist claims. Okay, well, uninsured motorist claims might not seem to be prime for high-end technology, especially CIECA technology, because the responsible party doesn't participate in the process. But current trends are to outsource files as soon as they're identified as such, and the volume is massive. So it's really important to be able to bring technology to it. Unfortunately, collection vendors and other outsourced vendors do have the capacity and definitely have the desire to implement technology improvements, and for the most part do at the rate of or faster than carrier clients. The overall recovery rate for collections on uninsured motorist files is in the teens, and it's a very labor-intensive process to collect them, so there isn't much margin to start with. And so we're always looking for ways to make it easier. Using the common CIECA language and automatic transmission of information can absolutely revolutionize the working of the files in this industry. As an example, in the late 90s, Wilbur was loading about 2,000 claims a month, and we had 60 employees. We're now loading over 10,000 files a month with fewer than 100. So a five-fold increase in the number of claims being handled better with less than twice as many employees. And really, tech is the only difference in that process. Fred, if you'd switch the slide to the next one, what CIECA does for Subro. So CIECA is very important in pulling this into an automated process. This has been a manual process for 100 years. It's been driven by letters, phone calls, and such work as that, mostly even on card systems in file cabinets. It's now become a nearly totally automated process, and that makes common communication even more important. Data can be pulled directly out of a carrier claim system, can be pushed into a recovery vendor, an ARB provider, or even another carrier's claim system, and essentially you can talk to anyone who's willing to plug into the process. So there's a number of flows once the claim gets going, but there are a limited number of flows, and that's the encouraging thing. Everything falls into a process. So let's start looking at a couple of different types of flows. Fred, let's go to basic Swimlane. In CIECA language, a Swimlane kind of shows how the case flows through the system. And the most basic is for undisputed claims between carriers. So in this context, your common language allows any field to be transferred to the other side, and when handling massive number of claim files and 4 to 5 follow-ups of each file before resolution, this automation is very important. So let's go to the next page, which is a diagram of the basic swim lane. This gets just a little bit hard to read, but you can see across the top lane represents the demanding party. The demanding party in this context is the carrier that paid the claim and who is owed back the money by somebody. The very bottom swim lane in CIECA is used for the responsible party. And this would be the person who caused the loss. This could be the attorney representing that person, or this could be the carrier providing insurance coverage for the loss. In this diagram, you can see that the two parties can communicate back and forth. They can send offers each way. They can trade documents, releases, and negotiate back and forth until agreement is reached. And even though that takes a conscious decision on the part of the claim handler, that's not automated. The act itself is automated, and the flow is automated. Once agreement is reached, the responsible party can then agree to pay the loss, and it can be processed through with very little handling up the right-hand side of the swim chart number 3. Fred, let's go to the vendor swim lane on the next page. So the vendor swim lane is a little more detailed and is used when the process of negotiation fails for some reason, or possibly there's not a carrier on behalf of the responsible party. It may be an uninsured motorist. This swim lane is styled around more of a recovery or collections vendor, but can be used with investigative vendor or any kind of outside support organization. And one advantage to using the common language in this context is the ease of using the multiple vendors within a single claim, and even to switch vendors if necessary mid-lane. So let's show on the next page, Fred, the chart showing a typical claim flowing through a vendor. Once again, we've got the demanding party on the top, and we have the responsible party on the bottom. But this time what you see is that the demanding party at first uses an outsourced investigative vendor, maybe doing some skip trace or some investigation of the loss, because this can be property loss as well as auto. Then the assignment is made over to a vendor, in this case a collections vendor, and that organization then contacts the responsible party directly and negotiates, does anything it takes to collect the money, works with that responsible party. During the whole process, you see 4 and 5 going up and down. That's for status request and doc transmission. The demanding party and the subrogation vendor can provide each other documentations, statuses, further information. You can audit claims, review settlement offers, and even close claims through this automated channel. And so there's very easy communication between the two without a lot of manual input. And then once again, resolution at the far right side is made whether the responsible party pays the vendor or pays directly up to the demanding party. And then, Fred, let's go to the arbitration swim lane. What this one shows is really as complicated a path as a claim could take. But it also shows on the positive side that all claims can be reduced into the standard flow. Flip over one page more if you would, Fred, and let's actually look at the chart. Now, on a PowerPoint presentation, this one looks pretty complex, but when it's broken down, it's really not bad. The demanding party is still in the top swim lane, and the responsible party is still across the bottom. In between, you can see the demanding party is able to assign the claim to multiple collections vendors, multiple investigative vendors, and right there in the middle also send the case into an arbitration status either through a ARB-writing vendor or directly out of their own internal ARB unit. The same information flows both ways. Documents flow around the circle, and timely demands are made on the responsible party. Then at the end of the day, we've got resolution of the claim, and each of these swim lanes actually includes payment both ways, just in case there is a counterclaim or some comparative liability. So let's switch over to the next page, Fred, to the claim status example, because this is such an important part of the relationship between the vendor and the carrier. During the life cycle of most claims that are outsourced, the carrier will want status for their insured. When the insured calls out to see what's going on, they'll hit certain time limits where they need to check and note their files, and a lot of decisions need to be made based upon what's going on at the vendor. Commonly, most outsourced vendors have online logins that allow carriers to come in, read the notes, view the documents, and make decisions. But the problem with this is every vendor's system is different, and the words are not common. And so through CIECA, we've got this kind of whipped into shape. Most of the manual touches are gone because statuses can be asked for in bulk and then delivered individually. Certain types of status codes can be reviewed more often than others. For example, if you've got an account that is paying, you may never want to ask for status on that because every month you're getting a remit. Whereas if you've got an account headed into the legal or the ARB process, you may want more timely status. Now in this arena, CIECA's done something really neat. They've taken every claim scenario and developed a status code that fits that. The status code starts with a three letters. It says identify the claim. It tells the carrier the current status of the file, whether the file is open or closed at the vendor, what the immediate past action was, and what the suggested future direction is for the file. There's right around 40 codes total, and really they cover every possible positioning of a claim. Fred, if you would flip to the next page, and we're going to look at the claim examples, the status examples here that are listed. Now again, there's about 40 of these, so I've just picked 3 really at random to show that the flow for each case file can be seen in an instant. Now again, this is a status code. This is not a full status of what's going on with the file. That can be obtained from other CIECA tables and from direct status requests to the vendor. What this gives the carrier is the ability to instantly know the positioning of the file. So the first one here, ADA is the code. It stands for Alternative Dispute Resolution Commenced. At the vendor, the claim is open. There has been no voluntary resolution at the claimant carrier, and the recommendation is to diary the file for alternative dispute resolution decision. So in an instant, the status of that claim can be found that it is in the middle of arbitration. PAY is another very common code. Payment plan in effect with the claimant. It is an open file. There has been a promise to pay received, and the vendor is asking the carrier to diary out for remittance. The last one, CRA, claimant represented by an attorney. This particular code would be used when the vendor is not the legal provider on a claim. And so in this case, the claim has been returned to the client for legal action with a recommend litigation status. There's another one that is exactly the same, but with a do not recommend litigation status. And so each of the codes are applied at the vendor level, but with some direction from the client as to how they'd like to see the cases reported back. So tables like this allow really a precise communication at the granular level on each file, and then they also allow for reporting back based upon the types of claim data attached to the file. For example, if you had pay files with one vendor, you could pull all the pay files and compare them to all the pay files at another vendor and compare the two to see if one is able to obtain larger or more reliable payments on cases from uninsured motorists. So a lot of drilling down can be done with this kind of information. And no manual work to be done as far as obtaining the data. So Fred, let's go ahead and flip over to reporting and take a look at this in a little more detail. I think that's one of the areas where CIECA in this arena is going to provide some of its most important value to the claims managers and the carriers. So many carriers set this year's goals based on last year's recoveries, plus 5% or something like that. But really, the goals should be based upon the root causes and conditions instead of historical anomaly. And the reporting that CIECA would give would allow carriers to better identify what claims are being collected and what pace, and set their goals based upon that information. Then benchmarking and sharing data is now becoming the popular thing to do, and I love it. With benchmarks, you can establish whether you're doing the job. And your own recovery rates standing alone really don't mean anything. They've got to be tied back to your own claims processes and viewed in light of your own philosophy of recovery. Do you try to recover first internally? How long do you hold files before assigning? And do you assign second vendors the opportunity to work the files? Things like that really affect the recovery rate. And now that we have a common language in subrogation, we'll be able to share that information between carriers and find out the most, the highest and best way to do this job. Many carriers really don't have an idea if their internal departments are more efficient than the external vendors that they're using, because there's really no way to compare apples to apples. But CIECA would allow for that. You'll be able to drill down to the most minute data element and then make those comparisons. Just as a simple example, a lot of carriers farm out a portion of their arbitrations and keep the rest in-house, more of an overflow kind of a way to do it. If you want to know if your vendors are doing better than your internal unit, you could take all the claims within a certain claim range, within a particular locality or venue, with similar fact patterns even. Then you could compare those looking at cycle times, at win rates, and whatever other conditions that you think are important to your unit. Fred, let's flip to future of Subro with CIECA. Subrogation is not going away. It is incredibly important nowadays, third leg of the stool of profit for companies. And so it's got to be done efficiently. CIECA messages are used in all the other areas of the collision industry. They've proven to be incredibly valuable, and most other carriers, most of the large carriers at least, have based their business on communicating this way with outside vendors. Subrogation really is just the last major piece of the claim that's been handled manually. And it's really important as this develops. We're 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through developing the Subrogation CIECA messages, that we get more carrier participation, broader industry participation in this to ensure that final product is adaptable by carriers and will be adapted by carriers. The other messages they've got great carrier participation, and some days I'm awed by the fact that I'm helping Charlie and CIECA develop a message as a vendor rather than as a carrier, and I've begged my friends at the carriers to get involved, because I really believe that more participation would be a wonderful thing for the industry. I know what it would save Wilbur, and it's probably 5% of our labor force. We are Subro only, but if you could apply that to a large Subro department, the results would just be astounding. So it'd be my request that any listening get involved with Fred and Charlie and CIECA and start investing some time and the resources of their company in getting this done. Fred, last page, go Subro, my motto. Fred, is there anything else you'd like to cover?
Yeah, I want to thank you, Ken, and I want to thank our audience for participating. Video and the PDF of the slides will be available within 48 hours, so please check on the CIECA website. There'll be a link on there for you. Also, as a reminder, the 6th Annual Symposium will be held on September 8th through the 10th in Denver. I encourage you to save those dates and join us. Again, I want to thank you for joining the CIECAcast. Thank Ken Wilber for sharing his expertise, and everyone have a great day. Thank you.